In the early 1870s, the American West was still half myth, half map. Gold and silver rushes had already made and broken fortunes, and people with money were desperate for the next miracle. Some new metal, some new strike that would turn dirt into dividends. Into that world walked two cousins from rural Kentucky, Philip Arnold and John Slack. On paper, they were nobody. Low-level prospectors, a bit rough, badly dressed, more dust than prestige. Exactly the sort of men rich bankers normally ignored. One day in 1871, they showed up at the Bank of California in San Francisco. Their clothes were worn, stained from travel. One of them carried a small leather bag and asked to deposit it for safekeeping. The bank employees hesitated. No one stores a mysterious bag without checking what's inside, so they insisted on opening it. When they finally spilled the contents onto a desk, a pile of uncut diamonds dropped out. Rough stones, cloudy, mixed with dust, but clearly real. Asked where they'd found them, Arnold gave a vague answer. Indian territory. No details, no map, just enough to plant a thought. Somewhere out there was a diamond field on American soil. That moment, two filthy prospectors casually showing a bank a bag of diamonds was the spark. The bankers didn't fully believe them yet, but they also didn't dare ignore what they'd seen. From there, the cousins began building the illusion. They had already been picking up cheap stones, garnets, other green and red minerals, while traveling through Navajo lands. Then they started buying flawed industrial diamonds and low-grade gems from dealers, including South African stones purchased through jewelers in London and Paris. They deliberately chose imperfect stones and mixed species, diamonds, rubies, sapphires, garnets, all together, scuffed and dirty, so they look like they really might have come out of the ground in a hurry. Back in San Francisco, they started showing small samples to a select circle of men, never everything at once. Just enough to hint, there is a huge diamond deposit somewhere in the West, and we found it. One of the people who took the bait was Asbury Harpending, a California speculator with a taste for big, risky deals. He saw the stones, listened to the story, and realized that if this was real, it would dwarf most gold strikes. The rumor spread upward with each retelling. Soon it wasn't just one ambitious speculator. It was major bankers and industrialists, including men tied to the Bank of California, and later even names like Charles Louis Tiffany, founder of Tiffany & Company, and members of the Rothschild banking family. But rumors alone can't carry a multi-million-dollar deal. The investors wanted proof. So Harpending took a selection of the stones to Charles Tiffany in New York for an appraisal. Tiffany was a giant in the world of fine jewelry, but he was used to finished gems, not bags of mixed rough. Still, he examined the stones and gave a stunning opinion. They were genuine, and the sample indicated an enormously valuable deposit. His valuation, around $150,000 for the lot, was used to justify a projected field worth millions. That's one of the craziest parts of the whole story. Tiffany himself was fooled. The authority everyone trusted basically stamped the hoax with a golden seal. With that appraisal in hand, confidence exploded. A new corporation was formed, eventually structured as the Golconda Mining Company, capitalized at roughly $10 million. Bankers, generals, famous lawyers, and wealthy families all wanted a piece. A former Union commander, George B. McClellan, showed interest. A Rothschild wanted data. The deal began stretching from San Francisco to New York to Europe. To make sure everything looked legitimate, the investors hired one of the top mining engineers in the country, Henry Janin, to inspect the supposed diamond field himself. They paid him a fat fee and stock options to travel out west, find the site, and give a professional opinion. Now Arnold and Slack had to turn their lie into dirt. They chose a remote patch of land near what is now known as Diamond Peak, close to the Colorado-Wyoming line. It was barren, windswept, and unremarkable. Perfect. Then they went to work salting it. They took bags of diamonds and other stones they'd bought in London, Paris, and from American dealers. Rough diamonds, low-grade rubies, emeralds, sapphires, garnets, mixed them and physically scattered them across the ground in shallow soil, pushing some into cracks, burying others lightly under sand. They walked the area sprinkling gemstones like seeds. This is one of the most insane details of the entire hoax. This rich diamond field was literally a farm of imported stones, hand-planted in a square mile of western scrubland. In June 1872, Henry Janine and a small group of investors were led to this spot by the cousins. It looked like nothing. A flat stretch of sandstone and loose dirt under a huge open sky. No mine shafts, no obvious mineralization, just empty landscape. Then someone started digging. Within minutes they were finding stones. Here a diamond, there a ruby, just by scratching at the surface with knives and fingers. Every few shovelfuls, another gem turned up. Men who were used to boardrooms and counting houses suddenly dropped to their knees in the dust, calling out to each other as they discovered more stones. Janine, the expert, saw exactly what Arnold and Slack wanted him to see. A site so rich that even a casual scrape of the ground produced gems. He later described the field as wonderfully rich, and declared that he had never seen anything like it. His positive report locked in the illusion. What nobody in that group stopped to question was how absurd the geology looked. Diamonds and rubies formed under totally different conditions, yet here they were, scattered together just under the surface like trail mix. But greed, excitement, and the presence of an expert silenced doubt. After that inspection, money flowed. The investors, convinced they were on the verge of controlling the world's greatest diamond deposit, bought out Arnold and Slack's interest. The cousins walked away with around $660,000, an enormous fortune in 1870s money, paid to them for a stake in land they'd merely salted. They took the cash and quietly faded out of the spotlight, just as the big players were gearing up to make even more money from the find. Meanwhile, the financial and political machinery around the scheme got even stranger. A powerful New York lawyer, Samuel L. M. Barlow, was brought in. He persuaded the group to involve U.S. Congressman Benjamin Spoons Butler, who was given stock in exchange for helping tweak federal mining law. Butler pushed language into the General Mining Act of 1872, adding the phrase, "valuable mineral deposits," which conveniently meant that diamonds on public land could be claimed legally once the field went public. So you had this surreal stack of lies, hand-planted stones in the desert, blessed by Tiffany, verified by a top mining engineer, wrapped in a company with millions in capital, and quietly supported by a congressman adjusting the law. It looked untouchable. The person who finally broke the spell was a scientist, Clarence King, head of the U.S. geological exploration of the 40th parallel. He and his team had just spent years surveying the very regions where this supposed diamond field was located. When he heard that a massive diamond deposit had been discovered right under his survey lines, and he hadn't seen it, something felt wrong. King happened to meet Henry Janin on a train and heard his glowing account. The more Janin bragged about stones being found everywhere, the more alarmed King became. If such a deposit really existed, it would be a geological event, and yet no natural evidence supported it. King quietly sent two of his men, geologist Samuel Franklin Emmons and cartographer A.D. Wilson, to track down the hidden site. He joined them soon after. They followed hints, rumors, and tracks across Wyoming Territory and northwest Colorado until they located the exact field the investors had visited. On the surface, they also found gems, but they weren't there to get rich. They were there to test a hypothesis. Almost immediately, they noticed how unnatural the site was. The stones were clustered where soil had clearly been disturbed. They were sitting in loose sand rather than in veins or geologically plausible structures. Diamonds, rubies, sapphires, and garnets were all mixed together, even though those minerals form in very different kinds of rock and conditions. From a geologist's perspective, it was a joke. King and his team concluded that the field had been deliberately salted with imported gems. In November 1872, King sent a formal report to the company's directors, explaining in meticulous detail that the deposit was a fraud. When the news reached the investors, shock turned to humiliation. Men who prided themselves on being the smartest in the room had been outplayed by two country cousins with a sack of flawed diamonds and a willingness to walk around a mesa sprinkling gemstones by hand. The press called it the most gigantic and barefaced swindle of the age. Legal action followed, but here's another wild detail. In strictly technical terms, Arnold and Slack had used real stones. They hadn't forged diamonds. They hadn't put false promises into formal geological reports. They'd let others do that based on what they found. In California, they were indicted for fraud related to the salting of the site, but the case never went to a full criminal trial. The standards of the era and the difficulty of proving intent meant there was no long prison sentence. Instead, investors pursued them in civil court to recover what they could. Arnold eventually returned to Kentucky. He reportedly settled some claims and later died after a dispute and shootout with a local banker. Slack drifted into obscurity and wound up as a coffin maker in New Mexico, far from the glittering chaos he'd helped create. The fallout reshaped more than a few fortunes. Some investors took heavy losses. Clarence King, on the other hand, became a national hero for exposing the hoax and later became the first director of the U.S. Geological Survey, a sign that the U.S. government had learned a painful lesson about trusting rumors over science. Looking back, the most unbelievable parts of the Great Diamond Hoax aren't just the planted stones or the secret desert field. It's the stack of respectable names: Tiffany, top engineers, famous bankers, a congressman, standing on top of a lie built by two dusty men with a leather bag. In a world without satellite images, online registries, or instant verification, that was enough. Today, the idea that you could sell a billion-dollar mine by literally throwing store-bought gemstones on the ground sounds insane. But in 1872, at the edge of the known map, it worked. Long enough for Arnold and Slack to cash out and walk away, leaving the mine behind as nothing more than a salted hillside and a very expensive lesson in greed.